Welcome back to session 3 of this course on understanding and managing depression. I'm Dr. Traci Moreno, psychologist. In the last session, we talked about how depression maintains its power over us and how it makes us believe things that aren't necessarily true. In this session, we'll talk about how depression can distort our thinking. You'll also need pen and paper to go through some exercises, so if you don't already have it, you can pause this recording and come back when you're ready. In the previous session, we identified negative belief systems that could be contributing to depression. These negative beliefs can worsen and cause cognitive distortions. Cognitive distortions are distortions to our thought process. Now, we can't necessarily prevent this type of faulty thinking, but we can minimize their impact on us by being aware of them and when we could be thinking this way. Let's review them and go ahead and grab that pen and paper as we go through them and try to recognize if you have a tendency to think in this way when you become depressed or even stressed, and just make a note of it. The first one is called polarized thinking. This is described as having thinking that is black and white or all or nothing. This type of thinking is problematic because we're choosing one of two extremes, and life rarely operates in extremes. This thinking includes words like always, everything, nothing, never. So let me give you some examples. I'll provide the cognitive distortion first, and then how it could be changed in a healthier way. So you could say, I'm not feeling very social today, so I'm not going to the party. Instead of, I'm not feeling very social today, so I'll just go to the party for a little bit. Another example, I used to work out a lot, and I just don't have that kind of time anymore, so I don't. Instead of, I don't have a lot of time anymore to work out, so I just do what I can when I can. The next one is overgeneralization. This is when we overgeneralize something by taking one experience and incorrectly applying it to all similar experiences. Here's some examples. I don't feel like I did a good job on that project. I never do anything right. Instead of saying, I don't feel like I did a good job on that project. I know I can do better in the future. Overgeneralizations also happens with stereotypes. An example of that could be, I don't tell anyone I have depression because everyone thinks poorly about people with mental illness. Instead of saying, I don't tell anyone I have depression because I want people to get to know me as a whole person. The next cognitive distortion is catastrophizing. This is when everything is a catastrophe. We assume the worst and expect nothing to work out the way we want it to. An example of this could be, I hope this relationship works out, but it probably won't. No relationship ever works out for me. Instead of, I hope this relationship works out. Hopefully, this one will last. Another example, I don't know why I'm trying so hard when nothing works out the way I want it to anyway. Instead of saying, I'm trying really hard and I hope it pays off this time. The next distortion is personalization. This is assuming that we're the reason something happened or that we caused someone else's thoughts or behaviors. The example, he didn't answer the phone when I called, which means he's probably ignoring me. Instead of thinking, he didn't answer the phone when I called, which means he's probably busy and will just call me back later. Another example, she probably left early because she doesn't like me. Instead of, I hope I wasn't the reason she left early. Another distortion is called mind reading, assuming we know what others are thinking or feeling. I know you're angry at me. Instead of thinking, if you're angry at me, let's talk about it. Another example would be, my family doesn't understand depression. They just think I'm lazy or making excuses for myself. Instead of, my family doesn't understand depression. I'll talk with them and try to explain how hard it is for me to do things sometimes. The next one is called mental filtering. This is when we focus on the negatives and ignore the positives. Example, I hate my body. I'm too fat. Instead of, I've gained some extra weight, but I have a pretty face, great legs, and there's a lot of people who prefer a more curvy figure. Another example, my boss told me I wasn't good enough to work on that project. Instead of, my boss told me to keep working hard, and once I have more experience, I'll be able to work on projects like that. The next one is discounting the positive. This is similar to the mental filtering. However, instead of ignoring the positives, we explain it away and provide excuses as to why the positive doesn't matter or count. An example of this, they said I did a great job, but they were just being polite. Instead of, they said I did a great job. Another example, I did it right, but it was just luck. Instead of just saying, I did it right. The next one is called magnification and minimization. This is when we either exaggerate something or minimize something. Here's an example of magnification. The drive up here was stressful. Now the whole trip is ruined. Instead of, the drive up here was stressful. Hopefully the rest of the trip will be better. Here's an example of minimization. I'm okay, I'll just get over it and move on. Instead of, I'm not okay, I'm sad, and just need some time to process how I feel. The next one is should statements. This is when we think we should have done something in the past or should do something in the future. This type of thinking is very judgmental and it can cause us to feel guilty and shameful. Here's an example. I should not have put off all of those errands because now I'm overwhelmed and don't want to do anything. Instead of, I put off all those errands, so now I'll just focus on getting one done at a time. Another example, I should clean the house so people don't think badly of me. Instead of, I'll clean the house because it makes me feel better. The next one is emotional reasoning. This is believing that how we feel about something emotionally provides some sort of factual or truthful information about a situation. The example, the thought of going to therapy scares me because therapy is stressful. Instead of, the thought of going to therapy scares me, but hopefully it won't be as bad as I'm expecting. Another example, I felt really uncomfortable because everyone was judging me. Instead of, I felt really uncomfortable because I was worried people were judging me. And the last one is labeling. This is when we reduce ourselves or others to a single description or label. Example, I'm depressed and anxious. instead of saying, I struggle with depression and anxiety. Another example. People who graduate from college are smarter than those who don't. Instead of, people who graduate from college may be smart, but there's a lot of smart people who didn't go to college at all. Now, for your therapy homework, keep these cognitive distortions in your conscious awareness and try to catch yourself when you start to think this way. Challenge yourself to think more rationally and objectively. As a reminder, you can ask questions and share your journey in the course classroom. This is the end of session 3.